Well, James, it's good to see you. It's good to talk to you again.
Hey Derek, good to see you again. I like this frequency of meeting with you. I really appreciate you reaching out. I'm excited.
Yeah, it seems like this is becoming like an annual thing because a couple of years ago, you and I both had our first conversation together.
Hmm.
It's pretty fun to look back to that point and then all what has transpired since then. And then we
Yeah,
had another talk beginning of the year after that. And so it seems like there's something in me that's just like, gosh, it's just time to talk with James.
yeah. No, I feel it too. I appreciate it. And we were talking about. Remember the last conversation we had was on January 6th, I think, or the 7th of
Yeah,
last year.
yeah, it was
So
darn close. Yeah, well,
yeah, we're appropriating that.
yeah, it was like the world felt like it was flipping upside down.
Yeah.
GameStop had just happened. That's right.
Yes. Yes. It
Yeah,
was.
one thing that stood out to me from last conversation was our how how'd you say it? The positive page of our conversation was our children and being
Hmm.
fathers and reading books. That one really stuck with me all year. Like
Yeah.
I still come back and I think about that, the ideas you shared, and I guess even the ideas that I stumbled upon because of the questions that you asked me.
Yeah. I think it's a good time. I want to recommend this book here, children's book. It's from Iville to Uville, and it's written by one of Saint Paisios's spiritual children. It's a great book. I got it for the kids. And it talks about the way that life is in Iville and the transition to Uville. It's really great, simple, wonderful lessons, man. So
Looks
to speak
awesome.
to our theme of reading to our kids and trying to impart them the simple yet profound wisdom of the faith.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Then around this time of year, I also have this thing in me that wants to produce a football video to make an essay or some type of video that takes a deeper look into sports and specifically football. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen. There's my first video was, gosh, like one of my first 4 or 5 videos. And wow, man, look at that beard. I was quite bearded back then. It was discussing the Super Bowl trophy ceremony. Um, Even Jonathan Peugeot left a comment, and
Hmm.
you left a comment. Uh, I'll just go ahead and read it because it was really, really good. It says, "Great video. One note: the mediator between heaven, the coach's game plan, and earth, the team, is the quarterback. The QB is the figure that expresses the coach's game plan on the field, like calling plays, audibles, inspiring through leadership, while the team as a whole materializes, supports, and executes the plan. Another note: I noticed you're conspicuously left out the obvious Christ figure from your story and your photo collage. You know, the one undisputed figure who's beautifully mediated heaven and earth, leading multiple teams to the pinnacle, the promised land, and more than any other. What's his name? I can't seem to remember. Dot dot dot. Only these symbols come to mind. And then maybe I can expand upon that. So we have the pirate's flag, greater than symbol, cheese slice with an LV. Probably, I don't know. Maybe you want to just start there and explain these symbols before we
Yeah,
dive
I
into
think
the
that
other
was
topics.
it was right after the championship, which I got the shirt here,
Oh
which was
man.
the championship, and Derek's a big Green Bay fan. I'm a big Bucks fan, obviously, and it was right after that game. So it was giving him a little rib on the Bucks winning it all. So that's why I wore my championship hat here. And I think it's fun to have, competitive and kind of back and forth like this. And something we were talking about offline is what is the nature, how can we symbolically understand competition and even, rabble rousing and talking smack in the right way. I think it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of times maybe outside looking in, people would have an opinion that, it's one of the negative components to sports. Like I have a couple books that I was reading up on the subject, just prepping for this conversation, but just the subject at hand. One's called Explaining Traditions. It's written by a professor that's in American Studies and Folklore.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the chapters is called on uh, on the Proxy of American football.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I'll share some other things about that a little bit later. But I just found that like on that point, he took a really negative turn where it was like, at least he painted it in a way that it was negative, where competition, rabble rousing, kind of jeering and jawing were these the negative attributes. But I was thinking about it, I was like, well, what does it look like in the positive? He kind of describes the shadow of it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But how could it be done in a playful way? Like how do we see this in other areas of play?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think what comes to mind, at least initially here, is the intention in the heart of the person or the people, doing the back and forth, right? If the intention is, to put somebody down because their team won, you can really feel it. When someone's kind of talking smack, a loved one, a friend of yours, and it goes back and forth. If it's done in the right spirit, it's actually fun. It adds to the competition and the spirit of it. So I think the intention is important there, and it's not easy. It's not easy to kind of navigate that terrain, because there's a big shadow to it, and people become, myself included. I mean, you can become, you can take offense, you can take things personal, so I think the spirit and the heart is important there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think the spirit of the game is one that is really important, but we don't quite understand. I mean, it's worth discussing, unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, let's see, I'm wondering where to start this frame the conversation. I'd like to start actually by just looking at maybe like a few of the basic symbols of the game, just in case people aren't as familiar with it. So that way, when we kind of get into deeper topics, there'd be at least a general understanding. So the frame of the game of play. So you have the field itself, and the football field has two sides. One has an end zone, the other side is the end zone. In between are increments, lines across the fields of, what is it, every 10 yards, every 5 or 10 yards. So it's measured, it's calculated. In the very middle of the field is a 50-yard line. It's the halfway point. And so the goal is to have two teams. One is to have an opponent that is on offense that's trying to get to one side, and on the defense, that other team is trying to stop the advancement of the offensive team to getting to the other side of the field or to the end zone. And of course, the teams have their offensive players and defensive players. So they basically swap and they take turns. It's like a parlay or something. And so as the defense can stop the other team, then they can switch sides, simply put, and then they have a turn at trying to score the touchdown. And so if you look at it, there's a lot of different ways you could look at the field of play. And so I was thinking, like, it's stratified. You have a goal at one end, and like it's also, the other thing I want to talk about too is from the get-go is controlling metaphors. Controlling metaphors. This was introduced to me by Alistair Roberts in his book, Echoes of Exodus, right here. I made one video. I should make more on the book. And then he talked about it a little bit more in our talk, but controlling metaphors is like the language we use to frame a topic. And so some other metaphors that we can apply and that you'll hear us use in our vocabulary is that of, frontier, expansion, military, corporate or business. You'll hear all of a sudden these words that take from that vocabulary will make its way into football to help frame how we understand. So for example, at the end zone, there's a goal or a goal post. So the goal is to get to the other side of the field. All right, so that's pretty much like the layout. I have a few thoughts on that, but I was just wondering if you wanted to add anything more to that.
Yeah, I think some things that just came up for me is, the halfway point is where the logo is, right? The logo of the team is right in the halfway point, right? And what is a logo, right? So you have my Bucks logo here, right? It's a symbol, right? But it's more than that. That symbol binds together people, right? The coaches, the players, and the fans, they become part of the body of that, of that team, essentially, in a
Mhm.
real metaphysical way, right? So the symbol is that which binds, that which gives identity, and that which situates a community. If you had the experience of being in a different town and seeing someone else with a certain the same logo of the team that you like, right? It automatically gives you a kinship, in a way to kind of relate to each other. So these seemingly superficial things like the logo of a football team, encapsulate or folded into it is the kind of the metaphysical structure of reality that Jonathan talks about and Mathieu does in the language of creation. And it's important that this idea of symbology or applied fractal symbology, it's not that you can use this rubric to apply it to all these different lives, different areas of your life, how symbols appropriate heaven and earth, right? You can do that and it personally, you can do it in terms of family, in terms of a corporation, like you were saying, in terms of a governing body, in terms of community. But in a beautiful, simple way to do it is in terms of a football team or a sports team, and applying these seemingly abstract principles found in the book in a real practical way that is, I think, useful. Another thing that kind of came up mind quickly is Jacob's ladder, right? So when you're going up and
Mhm.
down the football field, right, if you're aiming appropriately, you're gonna hit the mark, which is the score, which is scoring, right? If you're not aiming appropriately, you're sinning, right? You're missing the mark. So in the defense, you can look at, as the demons, right? And the offense could be the angels, and then vice versa, right? As you're trying to drive down the field, you're moving up the ladder. And if you miss the mark, throw an interception, fumble, right? You go back down the ladder. So it's like, again, it's this fundamental structure of reality, beautifully, explicated in American football.
James,
Um,
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when I was reading the explaining traditions chapter, I was just like, okay, one glaringly evident metaphor that's missing is that of the spiritual.
mhm.
It's like, oh my goodness, like there's so many applications. um, to where, yes, I absolutely thought of Jacob's ladder, because if you start, or even maybe like the story of an Exodus story. Oh, I have,
Is that you this time?
yeah,
Yeah.
one of my players, he wants to join in on the field in the action. Um, so we have, right. So you could think of it like Jacob's ladder, or maybe spiritual warfare,
Hmm.
with your life, and then all of these negative forces that are trying to drag you down or push you back, negative yardage, that of an Exodus story. So if you think, if you start, down here at the 10-yard line, you're near the pit, right? You're near the enemy's territory of Egypt. And then the whole middle of the field is like the wilderness journey. And then
Hmm.
maybe midfield is like Mount Sinai, right? The
Mm.
mountaintop experience. And so you're making advances through this, in between this wilderness area of transition, or of really transformation, because then you get into this land where it's closer and closer to the promised land, or
Hmm.
the end zone. And then finally you arrive there, and then there's, the celebrations, and there's the advancement, there's value that's added to not just the score, but to the whole team.
Yeah. The Jubilee at the end.
Yes,
Uh,
and all of the celebratory rituals that take place.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like, and
Wonderful.
yeah, and I was just thinking about that too, because it's amazing how, yeah, and in this book it touches on it, but he doesn't quite say it like this, so I'm adding to it. Football is the answer, or maybe it's filling the vacuum, right? This empty space that was once held by a Christian world in America.
Mhm.
And so if you look at the football in the spiritual analogy, or maybe some of the deeper meaning that we can learn from or point towards, it's almost like the rise with football. I'm going to stop sharing here. The rise of football matches or mirrors the decline of Christianity and its influence in the culture. So it's like
Mhm.
the rise of football is filling the void in this post-Christian era that we find ourselves in the Western world. And so
Yeah.
you see all of these things, like we're human beings, and I've heard this from anthropologists to priests to theologians. To be human, even at the anthropological level, is to be religious or to be ritualized. It's what we do to bring ourselves together, not just you and I and the people around us, but across time. Echoes of Exodus does a fantastic job talking about how festivals or rituals like Passover or the Eucharist, they allow us to transcend time because we partake in what was and what will be in that moment. Same with football. You see all of these rituals now demonstrated on the field. It's like we just can't help it. And so once people score in the end zone, like when we were growing up, we had divas, which we could talk about later, like wide receivers who would score all these points, and they would do the most elaborate celebrations. It just got ridiculous. The league finally had to put a stop to it and bring it back in. Like Terrell Owens, he took the ball, ran all the way back to the logo, right? The Dallas logo. Yeah. Do you remember that? And put the ball right on the logo as if to stamp his authority. And that was his way of celebrating a touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah. And we intuitively can know when it goes too far, right? We know intuitively of celebration is a good thing, but if it goes too far, there's an element that pops up, right? That's too far. You take it into the logo, right? Or the excessive celebration. So there's this sweet spot of celebrating, but not going, overboard. And I think that's, in terms of a jubilee, in terms of, partying with friends and family members. If you drink too much, there is these lines that are there. So I think it's a wonderful, framework to look at it. And something else that came up is, it's a good way to understand how the negative is not always bad, or even how we can think about good and evil, right? Evil is not always bad, right? So the defense is trying to stop the offense from scoring. The better the defense does, right? The negative, right? The more the offense has to step up their game. So it's like that idea of steel sharpens steel, right? So the tougher the defense, the better the offense has to get, and then vice versa. So the negative is not always bad if it's aimed appropriately. The demons in our life that we fight with are there for us to fight with and to become closer to God, right? So the defense there, the tough teams are there to play in order for you to increase your game, to transcend your limits, right? And to potentially win the championship. So I think it's a great way to think of how negative things aren't always bad, or we can take all the negative things in our life, and if we're aiming appropriately, use them to guide us on the way to the promised land, in a sense.
Think of James 1, like, count it all joy, my brothers, when you go through various trials, because basically it's through those that you're able to grow and get better.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking with I went to the St. Anthony's Monastery last week, and I was talking to a monk there that said he was sick, and he said thanks be to God, thank God I'm sick, right? They're thankful for the trials and the tribulations health wise, right? He was genuinely saying, thank God. It's like, wow, to have that mindset is really wonderful. And it's hard to kind of understand, especially when you're going through it. For someone to tell you that while you're going through something very difficult, it's like, yeah, I get it. Tony Robbins, thanks for that. But I'm drowning here in tears. So it's, again, there's this, it can go overboard where you're dismissing someone's pain, or you can be where you don't care enough. So there is this sweet spot. That's where I think the discernment and the heart, and the being centered kind of comes in. And what you were saying earlier, about, human beings, we pray, right? Birds chirp, turkeys gobble, dogs bark, humans pray, right? And we engage in rituals. It's just what we do. And there's no getting rid of that. The 20th century was the century of trying to get rid of, religious sentiment, religious ethic. And we see it come back. And we've talked about this in monstrous ways, in really horrific ways. So again, if you're not appropriately mediating the religious instinct, it will become, unconscious, and then kind of overcode reality. And I think we're right in the middle of that. So yeah, a lot of good stuff coming up from this topic, man.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to share from this book, because I'm trying to think of, like, what's the limitations of these metaphors, right? So we've discussed several. The spiritual journey is the one we probably explored the most so far. And we could talk about the military. There's even well, we could talk about the frontier, which is interesting because if you look at like the Bucks, the Niners, like a lot of the mascots or the identity or the, how'd you say, the spirit animal of the team, um,
Mm-hmm.
is definitely, I think people could make a very good case, like Exploring Traditions does, where this is frontier actors. These are frontiers vocabulary, where it's the westward
Mm-hmm.
expansion of the United States. This is cowboys and Indians, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so it's this idea of territory and land and conquering the land. And then, this is my turf, this is mine, like it's a home field and a visiting team. They kind of play on that tension. Um, and so like there's a lot of these metaphors, and he does a good job in the book, but it's almost like I want to start with something else that he points out, because I think it might be helpful to take the conversation that way. So he talks about play. So we talked about how football is like this frame, and it's this fantasy realm where it's game and it's for fun. This is something that we go to escape. It's a place, it's a domain that we go to, like we're pointing out the abstractions and seeing them carried out in this fantasy realm. So that way it helps us better understand how to act and live in our lives, in our work, in our families, with each other, with the teams, that we go work with to accomplish goals. So there's that, but then there's the positive things that we can take out of it, but then there's also kind of like the dark side. And so I'll just start by saying play can seem as a form of fantasy in which people take license to do and say what they cannot in everyday life, in the form of sport taken so seriously by fans that they blur the lines between fantasy and reality. Such distortions have to be managed. Social worlds have to be organized hierarchically to prevent the practice of sport from being perceived as a threat to society. Sport involves masses of people who engage in the praxis of playing without participating in play. Yet they help determine the frame by which the messages of play are perceived and allowed to occur repeatedly as traditions. Okay, so I just wanted to pull up an image, and I didn't notice this when I first made the video, but in the first football video I made on the celebration or the coronation ceremony of, oops, there it is, of the football trophy and passing it and awarding it. So we see the actors are all laid out in this photo. So at the very top, you have, what would you call it? The pinnacle, right? The symbol of everything that football stands for, of victory, of glory, in the Super Bowl trophy. And then you have this hierarchy that forms of the owner, right? The most valuable player, all of the top tier people. And then down below are the other players, the media, the mass. But then look in the background, you have all of the fans, the spectators. And I was thinking more about this, like that difference between praxis of playing and then participation. The thing about football is that there's more people who watch it than there are people who play it. And yet it's because of that audience, the game has evolved so much. And if you look at the media, for example, I make this more in my second video's point with the mythology of Lombardy, where's the last book I have for you? So another good biography on Lombardy is David Marinus, When Pride Still Mattered. Okay, so fantastic. It's not an official biography, but it was really well written. And he has a really good grip on mythology and symbolism, I found. There's a lot of lessons to pull out with leadership in the book too, but specifically the mythology was composed and expressed by the media from the get-go. And if you look at this race of American sports, football won because of its relationship, its symbiotic relationship with the media. and here's the point that he makes is if you look at the sports writers, like, New York, they had all of these new newspapers. It was very competitive. It was how they actually had a mythological sports writing back in the day. And so they would name things like the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame, right? The impenetrable wall, or there's a long list of all of these mythological stories and vocabulary that they used to express football. So it helped Lombardi become this larger than life figure even before he was getting into coaching. And so then if you look at how media evolved, football also evolved with it. You look at the boom of TV in the 60s, and some would argue that, Lombardi and, Madden and some of these other like really popular coaches and players and figures, it was due to TV. Some would argue that their popularity became what it was, that it took Lombardi was the best of the old world and the new world of media, because it was color TV that his championships were won. And so you have to factor that in. I mean, I have a lot to say on his character and everything else. The psychology was amazing, but you have to factor in media. And so if you look at how media has changed today, you can see how football's changed today. But then if you look at the viewing audience, maybe back in the day, you factor in cultural points like World War II, Vietnam, right? So all of a sudden, this military analogy, this game that so many people attributed to overlapping with, military ideals, suddenly that didn't become as popular with some of the crowd, with some of the audience. And yet it attracted others, who wanted to serve their country and, found football as an expression of military. But then you look at where people are at today and just how the media has really changed football. You look like, I don't know if I told you this, James, but I did not watch the first half of this year. I couldn't bring myself to do it because football for me was it was what he was talking. It was a healthy fantasy, right? It was a place where I'd go to. Okay, so in the book, Lombardi's dad had two tattoos on his knuckles. One said work, one said play, which was, right and left hand. That was actually like a pretty profound thing to do.
Yeah.
And then so for me, watching football is play. It's something I do with my friends. It's something I do with my family. It brings us together in most of the time, the right ways. But then all of a sudden it was like the audience, the media, they bring in all of these other factors to within that frame of football. Now all of a sudden, it's not just that I'm watching a game, I'm being indoctrinated into how I should think politically. All of a sudden it's like the element of sex, which I have some other points we could get into as far as that framing metaphor in football. But then it's also this frame of how I should think about society, how I should participate in society. And it's almost like they are tarnishing or blaspheming the name of football by bringing in all of these other filthy items, ideas into the temple of the game of football, if you will. And so it got to the point where it's just like, I couldn't do it. So I took the first half off, which was great because I ended up coming out with tons of YouTube videos and writing more articles for the Symbolic World blog. Anyway, so that's a lot. So I don't know, pick any one of those things and just go for it. James, what are you saying?
Yeah, I think you stopped going to church, right? Church is Sunday. You watch football with your family and your friends, right? That is like a ritual where you go to church every week, right? Taking a break from that, right? You stop going to church for the weekends in terms of the spiritual metaphor. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that it's tough to, football has stayed away more than basketball, right? And baseball, which I don't watch too much of. So there's a commercial here and there. And at the beginning of the year, they were really pushing the political BLM, stop racism on the back of the helmets and whatnot, but it's like, of course you want to stop racism. I want to stop murder too. And rape, there's a lot of stuff that we need to stop. And, but the way that they frame it is just off-putting. And it's not like you don't want to stop racism or whatnot, but it's not appropriate. And I think bringing up the sins of the left hand and the right hand, and Jonathan Peugeot made a recent video about weaponized compassion, right? So everybody would want to stop racism and to end bigotry, right? But you're putting on the helmets and you're putting it in these commercials and whatnot. So everybody is going to be for that. And then there's this parasite that sucks off this weaponized compassion and just kind of politically intrudes in everyone's life, right? And this political intrusion is not causing unity. It's causing division within families, within communities, within workplaces, and within football. The whole thing with the vaccines and Aaron Rodgers, right? And you know, did he lie to the media when he, you know, said that he was, you know, he said that he was inoculated? Who is he? Why would he have to, you know, be truthful to the media? Who is the media? Where they're like, how dare he lie to the media? Who are you guys? You know, the media, and it reminded me of the Marshall McLuhan quote, "The medium is the message," right? I think the media is the mediating role that, you know, that presents the event of football to the masses. But ultimately, it's the masses that are paying attention. It's the masses whose attention is what's lauded there. Remember when, you know, last year there was games without people in the stands? I couldn't watch them. Right? There's something about the consciousness of people gathering in a circle, you're right, and watching the event happen, and then at a broader level having it broadcast and televised. So the people are almost like a you know, a mediator or a kind of governor for the message that the media is presenting, right? The media can be pernicious in terms of its political and its economic influences, but I think there is a kind of collective governing where if it goes too far, you know, it's going too far with mercy, this weaponized mercy, you know, you're going to have people stop tuning in. I think basketball is a great example. They've lost all their viewership, you know, most of their viewership. Another example of CNN just lost 90% of its viewership. So to me, the encouraging part is that the truth exists. The truth is like a flame, and sooner or later, the lies will be burned away, right? And I think we're seeing that, you know, we're seeing that with the coronavirus measures that have been, you know, impacted on us. We're seeing it in so many different areas, and it's very encouraging that there is the truth, right? And lies, there's an African proverb, it says a lie only lasts 40 days, something like that, right? A lie cannot stand.
Right.
If you believe in this relativity, this relativistic idea that, you know, anybody, you know, living your truth and truth is all relative, it is not. And society cannot operate in that manner. Unfortunately, is that when the lies disintegrate, what are they going to take with them, right? You know, how much are they going to take? You know, how much is going to collapse? You know, while the lies, you know, kind of are burnt away from the light of the truth, which is there, and it's in there in kind of football. And to speak a little bit to the military aspect, you know, the military is heavily intertwined with the NFL, right? You have the just the sensational flyover of the F-16s during the beginning of the kickoff. You know, you have the salute to the military. That I think it's good. You have the national anthem and whatnot, right? But
and one of the two most prominent military holidays or recognition days, you know, 9/11, and then also Veterans Day. It was actually in Veterans Day that I started tuning back in and was like, kind of like, I don't know about this. But it was almost like they took a turn, and it was like, oh, the audience actually likes us when we're patriotic to our country. Maybe we should do more of that. And I could tell there was more of that theme being elevated and less of maybe some of the other, you know, modern political agendas.
Yeah, I think the pendulum is definitely swinging, but I don't know if this will track at all. Like, if things go too far one way, if we're fighting unjust wars, right? If our military is engaged in regime change wars and whatnot, then you have the phenomenon where the military it's not coherent with football, right? With this patriotism, in a sense, when most people are not happy or not in agreement with what's happening militaristically, right? And then a controversial topic would be, let's say, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, right? Well, my sensibilities, you know, I don't think that it's appropriate, because not everybody is applying the flag towards police action, So most people are not going to apply that Kaepernick taking the knee to this narrow use of police overreach and police abuse. Most people see it. My dad is they'll say my parents were in the military, my brother's in the military. You're taking a knee about my brother who's sacrificing his life, right?
Right.
Then in another aspect, he's taking the knee because there is, to shed light, to shine light on injustices that he feels and injustices that are actually there, right? And ultimately, it's going to be played out in the arena of public opinion, right? And you saw it swing a couple ways where people are like, yeah, let's kneel. There's police brutality, but then it's like, wait, you want to abolish all cops? All cops are bastards, right? It's like, whoa, that's way too far. So the sins of the left hand, they kind of oscillate, and we kind of find ourselves in the middle, which I think where the truth lies. So yeah, a lot there, but man, it's just a great topic to explore and lens to look through, culture.
What you were saying about the media and the audience reminds me of the priest and the congregation of a church, where the priest or the pastor is like the intermediary between, the heavenly and the earthly. And then it's almost like the media bringing in politics or just non-sport, into the arena of football, and then trying to deliver that to the fans. It's almost like whenever a pastor gets up there and instead of preaching about the higher principles and truths, the glories of God in the heavens, he talks about his opinions of politics. He preaches politics, and you're like, I just don't want to sit and endure this. I'm here to hear you preach about truth and God, and now you're trying to tell me about what side of the aisle I should vote for. So there's that thing in us where, as you said, the spirit within us, the spirit of truth, is like, nope, they veer too far. That's too far. And so there's always that course correction, that metanoia, like you pointed out in our first conversation. But then the audience plays a key role in that. I love the story of there's an Orthodox priest in a parish. He goes out to a conference, and it was like, all is one, all roads lead to heaven. And the Orthodox parish, the church, hears about it. And they're like, you know what? That ain't us. And so they changed the locks. And so he went to go back to his parish. He couldn't get back in. It gets to the point where, if you look at that as the head and the body, where the body rejects it and says, you know what, that the head is not representing us. Right. There's that lack of cohesion, right? The hierarchy becomes dismembered. And it goes the other way too. If the head tries to keep pushing something, the body finally says, you know what, we don't have an appetite for that. We're not going to integrate that. We're not going to carry that out.
It's like when a quarterback loses the locker room, right? Quarterback loses the locker room where his team, that quarterback's success depends on his team believing in him, right? If the team doesn't believe him anymore, he's done. Same thing with the coach, right? If the coach loses the locker room, loses his team, there's not this reciprocal, mediation between heaven and earth, where earth is supporting heaven and heaven is informing earth. When that happens appropriately, it just feels right, And another interesting, it says that winning takes care of all of the issues in the locker room, right? But once you stop winning, the problem between the coach and the quarterback is amplified. All of the sins, right, of the team are amplified if you don't win. But if you're winning, those sins are being mediated appropriately towards the end if we're winning championships, right? So there's so much there. And I guess a question that popped up earlier is, who are the refs in this example? And then it made me think, if football became about the refs and their opinions about the teams, right, and their I think that's what the media has become. When we see that the media has become hyper partisan, that's like watching football and the refs are, talking crap about the other team, where it's like, whoa, that's not right. Just like the media now, when they're editorializing it at every corner, it's like, I'm not here to hear your opinion, man. Show me what's happening, and I'll be the judge of I'll be the judge of whether or not I believe you, or if this is right or it feels right. But it's like we've turned we've turned football into, the refs are more important than the players and the plays. but it still holds in NFL, right? Because if a ref makes a bad call, I mean, he gets it, man. And if he ruins that game, you know, not like that. Well, I don't know, Dallas and San Fran. I don't know if you saw at the end there, the ref bumped into Dak Prescott, right? And he wasn't able to get the ball down and throw it down.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the collective is like, nope, if you make that mistake, man, you're going to be held to account. And I think we need to use that and apply it to the media and to the government. Because when the head doesn't cohere with the body, you get, you know, the head has to be expelled, because the head is what informs the body.
Yeah.
The problem is, in terms of the political sphere, and I don't know if you want to go this way, like, it doesn't seem like what we perceive as the head is the actual head in terms of the governing body.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you have something like January 6th happen, right, which, you know, I have no opinion of it. I'm not for any kind of violence or anything, but people, they don't know where the head is, right? So a different president comes in and nothing really changes. And that's happened for so long. It's okay. That's not the head anymore. Where's the head? And it becomes this ambiguous, you know, ephemeral, you know, where is this totalitarianism come from? Where are these measures that are insane coming from? There's not like one person that you can, or one entity you can look to. It's like totalitarianism that's distributed amongst multiple heads, like a hydra, right? And once you cut one off, another one pops up in its place. So it's like, I think that's it's really interesting to look at it like that. You know, so where is the, you know, the head of the American government these days, or globally? So I don't know if you want to go that way, but
well, I mean, we could address that via the controlling metaphor of football, if you will. So several things. So you want to talk about the body politic, or the head, the body, the various members, one of which is the referee. So I have a theory about the referees. Hear me out. So the referees are the ones that carry out the rules. And the rules you could look at as logos or logic. It is calculated. It's the principles. Okay. The refs are randomness. They're the ones that, you know, they relate to that, but at the same time, there's fallibility, there's randomness. They don't always get it right. This is really important in our lives, because that is how reality unfolds. That's the reality that we interact with. For example, with work, I come up with a plan. We have procedures, we have policies, we have rules. And then suddenly we get the call, you know, so-and-so trashed the apartment. Stop everything else that you're going to be doing today. You have to address this. That's randomness. That's something that we face. And so it has to be a part of the game if it's going to be a successful game that captures our attention and our commitment over a long period of time, over generations. And it's so the refs, as well as the shape of the ball. The shape of the ball is not circular. It's not a rectangle. It's oblong. It's pointed. It's whenever it is thrown and it bounces on the ground, it's random. It bounces here, it rolls a little bit, and then it flips up, you know, and it's anytime it rolls on the ground, it never rolls that way a second time. That's why football is a coherent game, is because it's including more of these elements of reality in it, I would argue, including randomness. That's why what I love about today, you know, in this like post-Christian, you know, materialistic society, is like, we want to calculate everything. We want data. We want facts. We want to be able to chronicle everything. Jonathan Peugeot, in his language of creation, which I'm showing a symbol of here, although let me take it down just for a sec. So he makes a point that it's like dry land, or reason, logic, calculation. It wants to consume everything that's strange or mysterious or random or unknown. It's the mystery. There's a mysterious part of reality where it's just beyond our knowing. You know, even the smartest person, there's always that veil of mystery beyond knowing that is at the same time structuring everything around us and in us. And so football has that. It has it in the ball. It has it in the referee.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point in bringing up randomness and bringing up that example there, right? Because you can't control for, if you try to control for all randomness, the system will fail, right?
Yep.
So, you know, we could have
Matrix made that point.
Yeah, we have slow motion and we have instant replay, but if you could, you know, calculate every, if you would get rid of the refs and put some calculating or AI, right, that would ruin the game in a
Yep.
sense. And
It
if you
would
think
lose our
about what we're trying to
attention.
do, yeah, exactly, we lose our
Yeah.
attention.
And you
if
know what I
we're
love
trying to
about
do
it,
that,
James,
yeah.
is like the better, like they have 8K cameras from
Mm-hmm.
every angle. They even have one that are like, I don't know, like zooming around the stadium. Like there's not an angle that isn't, uncovered at this point,
Yeah.
or unaccounted for. And yet it doesn't solve the issue of randomness or mystery. Like,
Yeah.
for example, that close call play with the Niners you brought up. I mean, the other one was that first down call where it was like inches. Like
Mm-hmm.
you just every angle, everything, like where do they put the ball? Sometimes it's just
Mm-hmm.
hidden or the angle isn't right or there's an illusion. And it's like we have like the most powerful camera, TV technology, instant replay technology, and it's only getting more powerful, yet it hasn't been able to calculate and account for everything, and it never will.
And you don't want it to, right? You want that element, that human element, or that element of randomness, because that's where the magic happens in a sense. And you can see it goes back
Yes.
and forth. Sometimes you'll have refs that are too strict or some that are too light, and they might be favoring the other team. You need all that mixed in. You need the margins. Ironically, what Christians are most lambasted for is that they don't treat the margins right, but you need the margins. They're absolutely necessary. And if you try to account for all the margins, the whole system will crumble. There's no boundaries, there's no territory, there's no coherence, there's no mediation between heaven and earth, and the system dissipates. And
it's
we've
not
seen that in
meaningful.
countless examples.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like even the course of our day. You say you go to the office and everything goes according to plan. There's nothing that's a surprise. There's nothing that you're not expecting. You go home.
Yeah.
What's there to talk about?
Right.
You have too many
Yeah.
of those days, and then you get so bored you consider leaving the job because it's so
Yeah.
predictable. It's
Yeah.
losing our attention. It's boring. We need that mystery, the randomness, the unreasonable. It's just a part of reality, and it's part of our lives. It's how we interact with it.
Yeah.
And so a
So
game
I don't
like
know. Yeah.
football has to include it, and it does.
I don't know if I've told you this, but I had, I've always dealt with this, underlying anxiety that I've had in my life, kind of misplaced. It's not directed at anything. And then when the coronavirus happened, it went away for almost the first time in my life. So it's like this monotonous late consumer capitalism of going day by day, going to work, coming home, eating, going to sleep, day, going to work, right? It's this monotonous. So once this chaos comes in, this randomness, which is, it's chaos, but it's also potential. And it's also different and new and novel, and it gives you, so it's weird how that happened, and I've dealt with it since I can remember, and it kind of went away. And then dealing with this all of this chaos and this randomness and this uncertainty that's come in, it's almost woken me up or made me more alive in a sense, but not always, right? Because it's still fearful. You have kids, you have situations, dealing with very difficult situations, like we're talking about with mandates and vaccine mandates, and having to do religious exemptions, not knowing if they're going to be accepted or how long they're going to last. And then it's like, you're dealing with this fearful stuff and this uncertainty that's real, but that's what's making the meaning happen. It's what's making reality vibrant again. Right. So I think it's important to have that randomness in there and to have that human element. And it goes back to this, we are not data points. We are not data points in a statistical analysis. So when you have a hospital policy that says, we do not want to have the family of someone that's dying with that person, because statistically there might be a X amount increase for coronavirus to spread if we let their families together. You multiply this by thousands of families, it's abhorrent, it's dehumanizing, it's absurd, and it's happened, and I think it's still happening. We have someone that's dying and they die alone without their family because of the statistical chances of the increase of the promulgation of spread of virus. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, if we're gonna put that on a pedestal over the life and death situation and being with someone when they die, I don't want to be a part of that system. I will not be a part of that system. It's absurd, So, the randomness, the uncertainty of having someone be with their loved ones because of coronavirus, even if they're in PPE, even if they've been quadruple vaxxed, we still don't want them to be with their loved ones when they die, because it will put more randomness in the system. it will put more uncertainty of unknowing how much more coronavirus will spread. So
well, it works that way too. So like we're talking about over calculation, and it consuming everything that is strange or uncertain. But it works the other way. When you have too much uncertainty, too much randomness, then you have a sea of chaos. You can't build a cohesive structure because it's all the parts are just like flurrying about. They're not able to lock in and work together. So like football, the center
won't hold.
Yeah. So football has a good balance of that where, and of course it's an ebb and a flow, right? So you look at over across certain eras and it's like, we're going to run the ball, power football up the gut, boom, boom, boom. And you just have too much of that. Like it kind of gets boring after a while, because it's like, great, they made 4 yards advancement, then they made 2, then they made 6. Every once in a while they make 8, like, okay. And then enter the era of, passing. And all of a sudden you had like 500-yard passing games where like the quarterback and the receiver. And then all of a sudden the game changes, right? The dynamics of the field of play change. And it's also an evolution of if there's too much of the chaos and they introduce more rules, right? Right. So like, so suddenly the defense, what they would do, they would just hack away at the receivers, so then they couldn't catch the ball. But then what happened? The fans were like, that's not fair. All of a sudden, the virtue of justice rouse up and it became a big deal. And it's like, that's not right. So then, the priesthood, the body politic responded and said, or the heads that be said, we got to change the procedures and the rules. We need to add more order here because it's too chaotic. And so anywhere you look, there's this ebb and flow that the NFL has done. And to their credit, they've made the adjustments that they need to. That's why they're America's #1 team. The other role that you mentioned was, how'd you say it? Like the sub-foundational or it's not just the head, because obviously the coaching staff is the head, at least the one that we see. But then there's the back office, the administration staff, the owners, the ones that are wheeling and dealing, merchandising, trading players, buying this, making deals with this media company. So they're the ones that are really calling the shot. I mean, how many owners do you know by name? There's
veiled.
Yes,
veiled order. That's behind the scenes. Like,
and even the few times that they do show them on TV, they're behind, shaded glass. Right. In the booths, high above, in the towers,
Wow.
Like, guys, like, you can't even make this up, if you're writing a fantasy story. Like, it's just amazing how symbolism happens. And, we just, you don't have to think about how reality unfolds itself consistently. It's like, there's this factor of the body politic that is the veil or the frame that we see and that we don't see. And I think some of it we don't want to see, like whoever is calling the shots for a country, we don't know their names. It's like we know who the head coach is, right? But maybe I don't want to get into that. As far as what I do want to say is, like, as far as the heads that we do see, and maybe that we can talk about with a certain amount of confidence, like the head coach. Something that amazes me about Vince Lombardi's story is that the Packers, with the same members, right, the same players the year before he became coach, they only won 1 game that season with the previous head coach. So they had Bart Starr, they had Paul Hornung, they had the whole lineup, Ray Nitschke, right? Like, all these guys were the championship Packers. All of the individual members were there. They just weren't properly organized according to a cohesive structure of success. So, the league actually threatened. They're like, hey, Packers, if you guys can't like show that you can compete in the league, we might not keep you in the league anymore. And so when they hired Vince Lombardi turned them into a winning team the next year. And what amazes me is, like, you look at, like, you study like the logos and the logi, like you introduce a new ordering principle, a new logos at the top, and all of a sudden he rearranges all of the existing material, just like, the word of God speaking. And all of a sudden he's ordering the raw materials of the earth into identities, into animals and crawling things and swimming things and flying things, and then, human things. He's organizing them according to the proper identity, putting them in the correct frame structure to where it's a cohesive creation. Same thing as Vince Lombardi. He reorganized that franchise into a way that it could be successful and win. And they never lost another season during his tenure.
He saw that they were good.
Yes.
He saw that they were good. He believed in it, right? It's not just about the moving around of players and whatnot. It's believing in them. And Vince Lombardi is not perfect, right? If he was perfect, that wouldn't have worked, right? He's a flawed man. He's a sinner, just like the rest of the players. But he saw that they were good, right? Believing in your players, this kind of reciprocal relationship that happens. I'm coaching my son's little league football team. You can see a little picture here. So season, last year, and
way to go,
he's
Dad.
Quarterback, right? He's going to be quarterback next year. It's so, and in the middle of coronavirus, right? I found a community, right? Other dads and the players and coaches. We practice Monday through Thursday, 2.5 hours a day, every day during the season, right? So I'm like, wow, it really felt community. Like I felt community for the first time. Like there's no other, neighborhood. I live in I have some friends, right? The neighbors, but you live in the suburbs. There's no community. There's no community at church really anymore. There's no, you're not going out to, bars as much as that's community anyways. But in this football community, people that care about each other, that have each other's back. And we impart that on the kids, and they teach us so much. So there's this reciprocal relationship. But what determines a good coach from a bad coach is the heart and is the belief, right? You believe in your players as people, not just as football players, as human beings with flaws. And you do whatever you can based on the more years that you've had on the earth than they have to impart that wisdom as best you can. And you are in a real way participating in something like the kingdom of heaven, right? You're getting a slice of the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God, right? By participating, interacting in this way. So it's like, things fit, things are right. Things don't always go well, right? There's disappointment. You lose a championship, but even within losing, you're edified and your soul grows from it. So having that right head there, like Vince Lombardi, right, reorients the whole team into winning a championship. Just like if you have, Mathieu has that page where he has all of the marks on the page to speak language, right? So the ordering principle, orders those marks on the page into a beautiful poem, right? So you'll have a good coach or a good front office even, right? Or a coaching staff. I was thinking like the coaching staff are like the angels, right? That are communicating down to the body, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a lot there, and the messengers, right? And then that message is either received or denied in big part if the players believe in their coach or believe that their coach has their best interests at heart. That's the big part.
Yeah, it's like,
if you believe that your CEO is embodying the mission and vision of the company, you will follow him anywhere. If you believe the politician, right, is genuinely looking out for the interest of the people, and I don't think it all happens consciously. It happens unconsciously. There's a spiritual transmission that happens, and these are spiritual matters, right, where you can feel if someone is looking out for you or really has your best interest in mind, or if they're duplicitous and and kind of holding a knife behind their back, right? The truth is there. It's everywhere present and fills all things. You can discern it, and you can discern it by how people are with you in a sense. And I think, going back to the rituals that we participate in our Orthodox faith, participating in these rituals, prayer, holding vigils, fasting, going to liturgy, it kind of like primes your heart. It primes the pump to discern reality. So when you see reality falling all around you, like, but you can just, like Jonathan says, you can observe the pattern, and in observing the pattern, you have solace because it's the truth. It doesn't mean you are the truth. It doesn't mean that you are right all the time. That's not what it means. It means you can kind of discern things in a way where you can kind of, appropriate reality in a way where you're providing well-being and flourishing for those closest to you. And hopefully you can ripple that out,
Yeah, James, that's so good. There's so many thoughts that spring off. So definitely I would agree with the messengers, where you have like the heavenly role players at the front office that's physically above the rest of the field. And then they descend to the earth. They're descending up and down like Jacob's ladder. But then the cool thing about when you have a good principle up above, then that has a way of lifting up the individual members or lifting up the earth, right? And so it makes the team better. Suddenly they're winning. And then like in the center, like we have the symbol, but you can insert winning team, right? Or teamwork. And that's the thing that really amazes me. I'm really inspired by the fact that you're coaching your son. Like, because the other thing I find fascinating about football is the generational component or the body politic of the team, where the Packers who won in the 60s, they're comprised of different members than the Packers today. Same with the Bucks, same with all of the other teams. So like, they're not the same team they were last season, and they're definitely not the same material. It's kind of like in our body, we have cells that regenerate. And if you calculate all of the regenerative cycles, we have a new body every 7 years. Our soul, our spirit, our heavenly and eternal things remain a part of our being. But our physical stuff, the earthly matter stuff, that gets recycled. And we see that in the body of a team. And I think of like the nation of Israel. They referred to them as the person Israel or Father Abraham. Like they were a part of his body. The person died long ago, but it's through his members, one generation after the other, that the whole is able to move forward in time. And it's similar with the church. You look at the apostles to the leaders throughout history, all of the different congregations. Like you look at this body of Christianity and how it's moving forward in time, one generation after the next. And it's comprised of new people, but they're filling those roles. The other thing I wanted to make mention of is I was really impressed by Tom Brady, maybe like how'd you say it? Like the Christ figure of this analogy is where the Bucks weren't all that great before Brady. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was kind of like, it was like those years leading up to that. It's like, I didn't even think about him very much. And all of a sudden in one season, it's not just the coach like Lombardi was able to do with the Packers in the 60s. Like it's amazing what the quarterback can do to a team. And if you have that right, direct intermediary that can, incarnate the plans of the coach directly on the field, it can make the biggest difference too, not just in football, but in life and the cosmos.
Became the coach, right? He became like Bruce Arians is like, do your thing, right? It's not to be blasphemous here. He's deified, right? He embodies the Father now. He embodies the principles he learned from the coach and from the years of playing, where he's pretty much a coach on the field in a sense. And he came and he brought his now the team is embodying the spirit of Brady in a sense. And I know the metaphor, you don't want to take it too far, right? But it's like the Packers are the spirit of the Packers imbibes in the body of the Packers year over year, right? You know what I'm saying? There's something that's there, and identities exist in heaven, right? Identities exist in heaven, are materialized on earth in a sense. So you really are a part of the Packers body, right? And I'm a part of the Bucks body, right? And when we go and compete with each other, it's not Derek versus James, right? It's about, my team versus your team. And it's not, and that's where it gets tricky. But like, it's about winning the right way. Learning how to lose is an important thing, right? Learning how to lose and how to appropriate losing and learning from it is huge. It's such a big lesson in life, right? And it's hard. We lost the championship last year in flag, and we came in, we were undefeated. We beat this team before, and they just had our number. We came in prideful, and we lost, and it felt bad. We cried. All of us cried, and it was like, oh. So it teaches you that pride is not the right way to go into any endeavor, in a sense.
One thing that I really liked about the rec league when I was coaching, I think it was basketball many years ago, All-Stars. I really liked how, so you have all of these teams and they would compete with each other. and then you'd select certain players from each team, and then instead of being opponents, now they have to work together on the same team. And like I just absolutely love that dynamic, because you could tell it was hard for them. It was a great like learning and stretching ability, where it was like, but wait, like we were supposed to not like those guys, right? And now the best player on the team that, you know, beat us, right, in that close game, now we have to play alongside each other, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know,
It's funny
great
you say
lesson.
that. So the kid, we played flag a year ago, the kid that was on the Ravens team, he tore us up, right? He just was a speedster, right? He ended up being part of our tackle football team, and he's one of our studs, right? You know, it's like, oh, that kid flayed us. This little kid, I mean, he's fast as lightning. And now he's brought into our team, and now that's forgotten, you know, because he's part of our tackle team. You know, flag kind of is like off season what we do. And he's a Mustang now, you know what I'm saying? He's part of us now. So it's interesting. I think our politicians could learn a lot from that, of how to be bipartisan, right? You don't want to be bipartisan. To actually be bipartisan is to actually genuinely engage with your, you know, your adversary in the appropriate way, right? You know, that if that doesn't get fixed, I don't know. We don't have to go in that way, but something else that popped up was, you know, what is the head of the corporation, the veiled head of a corporation is the boardroom, right? Or you have multinational, you have multiple board members, right, on multiple boards of different companies. Who's the boardroom in a family, right? The in-laws, right? The veiled in-laws that, you know, will send messengers, other people, like more in like in a village, right? You have the in-laws that will send people in the village to communicate to the family in a sense. So I just wanted to bring that in for a little levity of you know,
Oh yeah.
who's the boardroom in a family.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so there's one more metaphor I wanted to run by you, and that is the sexuality of football. Okay, so in the Exploring Traditions book, it kind of gets weird with like the Freudian stuff, and I don't really want to take it there. What I really want to say is that I found it helpful. The parts that I found helpful about this frame is the transition from adolescence to manhood. And I'm just, so let me lay it up and see if you agree or have anything to add. So you start on one side of the field, right? And then you end up on the other side of the field. And so the first side of the field, you could say, is your early years with your mom and the nurturing that you experience from your mom. And let me pull it up. Where's my, no, come on. I have to pull it up. But so you have your mom on one side, and then you have your say like your wife or the woman in front of you, and you're striving, you're working, you're trying to get to the other side of the field. And so you have this tension where you're trying to learn and grow, and you basically have to like become a man as in order to gain your future bride. Right. So it's kind of like this Oedipal story where, you know, you have this mother that is behind you, and if you're not careful, you'll get pushed back to that and you'll be consumed by that, figuratively speaking. And then in order to grow, you have to strive, you have to work hard, you have to overcome opposition in order to get to the promised land of starting a new family, starting something new. And so coming of age, I guess you could say, like, some people look at football and they relate to it because they're like, man, I'm struggling to try to get to that other side, to be a man and to do it with, you know, discipline and virtue and execution, you know, to gain value. You know, you go to the end zone, you gain points, you're trying to gain value. In that case, it'd be like to build a home, a space that you can grow your family with your new wife. Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, what came to mind is faith. That's where faith comes in, right? Because where in the scripture it says man must leave his mother and his father, right, and cleave to a woman, or I think it's maybe the other way around, right? So you have to leave your family and you have to make a clean break and have faith that you're gonna, you know, like a seed falls from a tree, it's got to fall from the tree to grow. It can't be holding on to the tree, right? Or it won't go into the ground and it won't grow. So I think that's where faith comes in. is you have to have faith when you leave your family that you're going to find the promised land. There is an uncertainty there, and you're going to have to make that leap of faith, right? If you don't, that's when the in-law issues becomes a problem. If you're still attached to, kind of your mother in a way that's not healthy, right? That's going to be imparted on the new family, right? And it's not, the new tree is not going to be able to grow appropriately if there's not a clean break there, right? So yeah, I think like, you do see a lot of players go from college to football, from college to the NFL, right? It's number one draft pick, but they don't, they didn't pan out in the NFL. Why does that happen? Right? There's a maturity issue, whatever the issue might be. You have to have a clean break, whether it's going from high school or from little league to high school, and then from high school to college, and then from college to the NFL. There are certain functions, there are certain, a constellation of things that you have to kind of graduate from, right? If you don't, you're going to have more trouble in the next stage. And I think that's equally and probably even more poignant within leaving your family to go start your own family. So yeah, I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, I know a lot of NFL players, they struggle once they retire, especially ones that was, premature, like they thought they still had more years left in them. But then I hear, others, they do really, like Ronnie Lott. I was listening to Ronnie Lott on the radio, and he was saying he was able to take the best things that he learned from football and apply them to life. Like he was saying, every day I was on the team, I wanted to make a play. Every game, I wanted to go out there and make a play. In life, when I start my day, I'm like, okay, what's ahead of me? What's the opponents? What are the goals? Okay, I just want to go out there and make a play. And so I think that's a good point that you make about transition, that it's not just, from household to that you grew up into the household that you have to make. But it's actually kind of like that Exodus journey throughout the different stages of everybody's life. The other thing about the sexuality part I find interesting is the masculine attributes and the feminine attributes. And let me just preface this by saying I'm not talking about male and female stuff here. I'm more so talking about something that you would understand, like the yin and the yang. These qualities, these patterns, these characteristics that are consistent and have for many thousands of years been categorized by masculine, feminine, or yin and yang. So like a masculine attribute would be the team that hands the ball off and they charge, they challenge, they say, we have a few plays and we're going to execute them. And then you have other feminine attributes where like you talk about like trick plays, sneaky plays, plays of finesse. Like this year, like Aaron Rodgers has mastered that like fake handoff and then kind of hide it behind his hip out of sight, like a magician or something, like this sleight of hand. And all of a sudden everybody's like, wait, the running back doesn't have the ball. Oh my goodness, who has the ball? And he's like, it's in the end zone or something. But then I was also noticing how like there's certain roles that lend itself towards attributes of being a diva or a prima donna, that of maybe like a wide receiver or a star athlete, where it has to do more, instead of direct lines, you look at the routes of receivers and it's more curvaceous, or has more of a roundness in nature. So instead of going like direct head-on assault, it's more of this game of graceful finesse and kind of playing with the veil and the mystery. I don't know. Do you see that in football?
Yeah, no, that's, I was reading, that's when he said that, because chapter 19 of the book, you have this drawing here, right? It's actually the sexuality as microcosm, Adam's reproduction. And I was thinking that where it says, heaven and earth, and then male and female. So what is the male aspect of the quarterback, right? The male aspect of the quarterback is taking orders and operationalizing those orders on the field. But you think of a play breaking down, right? You have someone like what's his name? KC's quarterback, Mahomes. When the play breaks down, or a Russell Wilson or a Kyler Murray, right? The play breaks down. They have to take that uncertainty with the play breaking down and finesse it, right? And make the play. So the quarterback, some are going to be predominantly more masculine in terms of pocket passers, right?
Yeah, take 5 steps back, look, throw the ball ahead, advance.
Yep. And then you'll have other quarterbacks that are more running or more, like a Russell Wilson, right? Where he's not a pocket passer. He's almost too much order. He will not be effective in, right? Like he needs to run around. He needs to be able to throw it and kind of use that to make the pass, while other quarterbacks are more, traditional pocket passers. So you need to embody the masculine and the feminine within yourself. Everybody does, right? And the same thing with a quarterback and a team. I think at each level, being able to improvise is more of the feminine aspect, and be able to kind of efficiently, follow through with something is the masculine impact. And they're both absolutely important, but, the way that looks, if it goes wrong, that looks bad. And the whole gender situation that we're left with here in the United States is a way that can go really bad.
It's hard to even have that conversation, which is crazy, because the two examples, Christianity, in the maybe like the Near East and the West, and then you have all the way over in the, I guess we could call it Far East from our perspective, like Taoism and the yin and the yang. It's like those are like it's across the, they have understood reality unfolding in terms of yin and yang, masculine and feminine. But then it's a fine line today, because then you enter in gender, male, female, societal roles, and it's a hard conversation to have, but it's frustrating because it shouldn't be, because we've been talking about it for so many thousands of years in these terms. But the thing that you bring up is that the quarterback needs to embody both. And you know what? Like, so there's two examples. So one recent, last year when the Packers played the Bucks, I really felt like the Packers played better that day. And there was one play that the Bucks won that game on. I mean, they did great the whole game. It was a heck of a rivalry. But last year, it was right before halftime. The Packers defense, they failed to catch what would be an interception. And the very next play was fourth down, right? Typically, the orders are punt the ball, trust your defense. Brady said, no, coach, you're going to have to trust me. I'm going to go out there and make a play. And sure enough, he throws a touchdown pass. And the Bucks won by what? Like, I don't know, 4 points or something. And it was that play where it was just like the Packers, I think they punted, or no, they kicked a field goal. And had they been aggressive, maybe they would have made up those 4 points. You start seeing that dynamic where like it was his ability to bravely go into the realm of the unknown with this dangerous play of, throwing a ball on the fourth down. It's either you get the points or you don't. Similarly with the Ice Bowl, the infamous Packers versus the Dallas Cowboys, it's like negative 100 degrees or something. And there's like this block of ice that is the ground right in front of the goal line. Yeah. And a lot of people think that Vince Lombardi was this militaristic guy. He wasn't. He was a phenomenal teacher, and he loved and trusted his players. So Bart Starr called the quarterback sneak, one of the most famous images in football, right? Super Bowl, 1 or 2 or something. And he did the quarterback sneak over the line. They had handed the ball off, the play that everybody was expecting, to their all-star halfbacks, Taylor and Horning, but they kept slipping on the ice. And so in a matter of, finessing and changing, element of surprise, taking the game, the principles that the father was giving him, Bart Starr, the quarterback, said, no, Lombardi had no idea that he was going to do that. And it was the game-winning play.
Yeah. That's I think what comes to mind again is faith, right? Yeah. Faith, and faith is informed by competence, I think, and it's informed by, like, Tom Brady had the faith to make that play because he's practiced so long. He's gone through the discipline, the asceticism, where you cultivate the ability to have faith in yourself and in your team. So I think there's a yin yang relationship there too. You can't just, if you have blind faith without the competency behind it, it's a disaster. Or if you have, not enough faith and you have a lot of competency. So there's a really important spiritual principle there that I think is important, right? Especially when you're going against the coach, or a lot of times the coach has to have trust in you as a quarterback as well, right? So there's a give and take there. I think it's a beautiful example of playing with the feminine and the masculine, right? The feminine is the more question, more uncertainty, the earth figure, and then the masculine being the more kind of orderly, If it's too strict in either way, you're not going to have a coherent, event, whatever that event may be.
It won't. Again, it won't be successful because it won't capture our attention. And like there's a lot more feminine attributes in football than are obvious. So many people think, oh, it's just military metaphor. You're like, no, like as we've discussed, when you take a deeper look, you're like, if it didn't have these feminine attributes, it wouldn't be all that interesting. We would tune out. The other thing too is I was just thinking about how, so maybe let's talk about the games at hand as examples. The element of the opponent. A good story is where the protagonist and the antagonist or the villain actually have a profound respect for one another. Don't you find that interesting? Like some of the, and like, I think it's like they see each other in the other, like they're both driven to achieve, they're both, called to something great. And yet it's like they find camaraderie in the very opposition of, each other. In football, like I'm looking at the Niners and the Packers game, which, we're recording this, I don't know, a handful of hours before it takes place. I really admire Shanahan as a coach because once he finds an advantage, he will not relent until the other opposition can prove that they can stop him. So like, for example, if he's like, you know what, I think we're going to run it 50 times this game. I'm seeing a weakness in that defense. They can't stop us. So guess what we're going to do? I think there's stretches where he'll call plays. Usually plays are like, a little bit of run and then the next couple pass and then a trick play and then a pass and a run. He's like, we're going to run it until we get negative yardage, until we can't convert on a fourth down or third down. And he will just drill it. And I just love that about him. I love that about him. And then there's other times where like the Packers coach, it drives me crazy because they will lose focus or they'll lose faith in what works, or they'll lose focus in what got them there. It's like a Christian stopping to pray, all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, how did this day go so horribly wrong? How am I in this puddle of stress and depression? You're like, oh, I failed to execute, I failed to participate in a faithful manner.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think to bring it back full circle, when we were talking about the beginning, how you talk smack appropriately, right? How you is you have respect for your adversary, right? And that's what makes you better in the sense you step it up you step your game up to the promised land and get you to the promised land. And then fractally, I was thinking of two mob bosses, right? Two Corleone family and the Gotti family, right? The heads, they respect each other. And if there's that mutual respect, then that territorial boundary is maintained, right? And you're still going to have the warring factions in a sense. But something about football is that the promised land, it always resets after every year. You reach the mountain and you don't just hold on to that mountain and be like, that's it, right? When that mountain, you go to the mountain and then you're done. And then the mountain's available for everybody again. So there's this jubilee, there's this forgiveness of debt, right? That happens. It's built into football as well, that we could probably imbibe into our same thing with the respecting the adversary back into our politics, right? If we can reinvigorate our politics with this respect for your adversary, and then maybe put a debt jubilee somehow back into the system, where, you're forgiveness. That's what's missing, man. Forgiveness, and mutual respect and love and heart, and a lot of these Christian ethics that, are will have to come back. So,
I think that's a beautiful conclusion. And I'd have to say, I've never said this before, but I think that the seasonality of football follows almost like a festival pattern of Christianity. Because if you like at least historically, the championship game was played at New Year's or really close to it. I know we've extended it because of trying to, expand the season. But it follows really closely to the passion, and not just the passion, but the nativity of Christ, where the nativity of Christ happens at close to the winter solstice. It's the darkest time that the light comes, and it's in this autumnal and cold and harsh time, this darkest time, that the champion is crowned, and the shining glory of the trophy is bestowed from on high.
Yeah, well said.
Well,
well said.
That's what's ahead of us. At least I hope you enjoy the playoff season, and I really hope that the Packers and the Bucks get to play each other again.
Me too, man. Until then, go Pack, go.
Yeah, and go Bucks. All right. Hey, James, any announcements on your end? Did you want to leave the people with, like, what are you up to? What's new at the YouTube channel? I know you're working on some poetry that you're sharing with me.
Just yeah, just some different things. I'm gonna, we talked about earlier, I'm gonna do a little breakdown of this series, the Revelation series, the 7 Gold Lampstands. The first one, it's by Archimedes Mitilianos. Really, really wonderful. I'm gonna read the first chapter of it on my video here. I got a couple interviews lined up. Father Nikolaos Ludovicos, again, we're gonna be exploring his book, A Eucharistic Ontology, Maximus the Confessor's Eschatological Ontology of Being as Dialogical Reciprocity. Word, a mouthful there.
Fantastic title. Yeah.
St. Maximus is really, I really appreciate him, and his body is, I think needed, in these times. So a couple other things, man, just, seeing what pops up. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm definitely keeping the dialogues going, keeping the conversations going. So this is the maiden voyage of 2022. It's the first conversation that I'll post, which is becoming the seasonal ritual at this point.
Love it. Love it.
But then I'm also going to be talking with fantasy author Nicholas Kotar. We're going to be kind of exploring the hero's journey, not just as like a, how do you say it, like a pattern for writing novels and stories, but like as a pattern of life and reality. And then I'll be having another conversation with Jonathan Peugeot. I think we'll probably talk about aliens and Arrival. There's some other things that we're kind of kicking around. I'm open for other suggestions as far as the topic goes. And then I'm still going to be doing videos. I'm not sure how many, how do you say, like essays I'll be able to do, because I'm remodeling a house. And so I'll probably be able to share more of insights from books. And I want to continue writing. So I've been less involved, more so with like the video component, and more so with the writing, getting back into producing articles to be posted on the Symbolic World blog, and also helping out with editing and some other things with the other people that produce material for the blog. Awesome. So as far as the series go, I'm also doing an analysis of Queen of the Night with, so yeah, Dirtpoor Robbins and Neil deGrasse. Have you checked out his silent film?
Not yet. I was waiting to a few of the episodes to come out. And I was going to get through a few of them.
Yeah, they're pretty special.
Good. I heard they're real good.
Yeah, they're like around 10 minutes each episode, but they're super dense. And so he asked me to, unpack them or help people see them with better eyes, so to speak. That's been a fun process. But then I'm also finally publishing my essays on Arrival, the sci-fi film. They've been a long time coming. I finally came out with my first one, Arrival and Exodus, the sci-fi film's hidden structure. But then the next one's going to be about language, and I'll be leaning pretty heavily on language of creation.
Awesome, man. I got to rewatch the movie again. I read some of your writings on it, but I got to revisit the movie again. I watched it when it first came out. It might have been even in the theater, but it's one of those you got to revisit. There's so much there. So yeah, I look forward to continuing to follow your journey, and I'd love to talk with you again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man.
All right, man. Thank you, Derek. God bless, man.
Okay. God bless.